please welcome Carleigh Burns to get to know you. Welcome, Carleigh.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, lovely that you're coming out on the podcast. That's fantastic. I love it. It's very intriguing to me about naturally healing. And because the listeners know I'm from a science background and we're usually into we're needing, I guess, people we look at more medicines and so on, but
Mhm.
medication free ways, and I'm actually doing that with myself as well, like with natural kind of supplements and different dietary changes to help heal my own things. And it's definitely something I think more and more people are understanding and wanting to understand. So how did you first, I guess, come into this natural healing of your mind? What's been your progress? Like, what have you been doing for yourself?
Yeah, well, that is a question that has a very lengthy answer to it. So I'll try and give you a bit of a short version. I've never been a huge fan of pharmaceuticals. I've never been a huge fan of being dependent on anything. I don't drink coffee, for example, and I did throughout university, but I didn't want that to be something that I was dependent on in my daily life to feel okay. So it goes the same way with medication. And I experienced many years of, troughs and valleys in my mental health, experienced really deep depression, really crippling anxiety, and then eventually experienced mania, which warranted the diagnosis for bipolar disorder. And when that happened, I knew I had two choices. And I could either go the traditional route and get put on medication that I would probably need to take every day for the rest of my life, or I could find an alternative way to heal. So that's exactly what I did. And I started exploring what worked for me, what did the science say was working, what did, age old spiritual texts say was working. And on that journey of exploration, I found a program that for myself works very well. And it's, I say that I don't use any medication and I don't, but my medication, my medicine is making sure that I'm upholding these things that I know brings me healing. So, for example, exercise is one of my number one priorities. And I notice if I don't move my body for 2 or 3 days, maybe I have a lot of work going on, or I'm traveling and I'm on a plane for a long time, or whatever that looks like. Sometimes it happens there's 2 or 3 days where I haven't really properly moved my body. And I can feel that I start to get more anxious. I start to get more irritable. I start to get jittery. I don't sleep as well. And right away, I'm like, oh, I haven't been exercising. Of course, I'm feeling like this. So it's still, it's finding those ways of maintaining a positive mental health that don't rely on the pharmaceuticals, on the medication.
I love that. I love that a lot. Like a lot of things are coming to my mind. I think, firstly, like anxiety, there's lots of different types of anxiety.
Mm.
People have different triggers. Yeah, I think people don't realize that anxieties are there's like so many categories of it. And the other thing too that's coming to my mind is that, even with bipolar, like I have a friend who has bipolar and she was on the medication, like she needed the medication. But then I'm thinking like when she was on the medication, she was just like in a funk, like as well. Like
Mm.
I'm not saying anything bad about medication, but she
Mm-hmm.
was in a funk where it was like, she's just like, I'm drowsy. It's like making me feel drowsy. I can't
Mm-hmm.
concentrate. Um, I it's just like um I don't know, it was like not it was like she's saying she was like high or something with the medication because it's
Mm.
like she can't drive, she's like not with it. She's not present in conversation. So it was interesting how the medication was doing that for her. With her bipolar, maybe because like she has other things or maybe other health reasons why that interaction happened for her, or she may have needed to
Absolutely.
change that.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of medications, and that probably was part of my fear, all those years ago when I didn't want to take it. And I still don't, but now I don't have that fear because I know that I don't need it.
Mm,
But that was part of my fear, was all of the side effects that come with most medications. And I mean, a lot of people in our modern society are on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication and that kind of thing. And I had friends throughout university when I was going through this whole, you know, unveiling of my diagnoses, that were on medication and they still didn't feel happy, didn't feel content. It was still like, I'm not in as much pain now, but maybe there was still a bit of numbness. And it's still, to me, it was very obvious that even if medication is helpful, and I fully recognize that for some people it's absolutely necessary, and for a lot of people it's very helpful, it's not the final answer. And, even when you're taking medication, this sort of healing, holistic healing, bringing in daily practices and, going through your life and figuring out what's actually good for you and what's actually feeling good is still going to benefit you. Even if you continue taking the medication, it's still going to uplift your life, which is really beautiful.
Exactly. Like people aren't realizing. Like I was speaking to a therapist on the podcast, and she's on medication herself for her own, like therapists
Mm.
need therapists too, and the thing is that I think people don't realize is like maybe you do need medication, maybe it's part of it, but that's a little part of it. It needs to prioritize
Mm-hmm.
exercise. She still needs to prioritize yoga. She still needs to prioritize meditation. It's like a whole mixture of things, and the medication's not even a fix. Like people are like, oh, just I'll just take the medication. Yeah, but then you're still in the same place. Like the medication for many people, because that's the only thing that they're doing, they're on it,
Mm-hmm.
they're taking it, but they're not seeing it. There's no changes are happening for them, which I think they're not really like, it's like, oh, I'm taking the medicine. I still feel like shit, but I'm still taking the medicine. Or I still, my head's still not right. I'm still going to take the medication, but I'm not going to do anything else. That's like 80% of the people.
Absolutely. And that's such a huge problem, because that just really speaks to the disconnection that I think we have in our society, that we don't often recognize the interconnection of all things, and it's it's so important to take a step back and look at your life from this holistic point of view. And how, not only how are you taking care of yourself in terms of like your exercise, your sleep, are you meditating, are you taking time to refuel, whether that's having a hot bath or a spa day or whatever that looks like, but also how are your social connections? Do you have people that you love and that they love you, and can you rely on those people? And how's your connection with nature, and how are you talking to yourself inside of your head? And all of these things, none of that automatically gets fixed if you start taking a pill. It's like maybe there's now some neurochemistry that's being tweaked that is going to help you bring things back into balance, but there's still all these areas that you need to be diving into and looking at and picking apart if you want to find true healing.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, the chemical part of it is what the medicine does. I think people don't realize that's the chemical, okay, making sure maybe things aren't balanced. So we're going to put everything in a balance, but it's not changing your thinking. It's not
Mm-hmm.
changing, your sleeping patterns. Maybe there are some antidepressant medication that does help with sleeping, and people do take it. Fair, okay. Maybe you are sleeping a bit more, but it's not changing your diet. It's not changing, the people you have around you. It's not changing, making those those all those things make a significant impact on your body. Like people don't realize how much your thoughts impact your body on a cellular level. Like it's causing
Mm-hmm.
a physical chemical reaction on your body on a cellular level that's either splitting cells in a healthy way or splitting cells in a stressed out way.
Absolutely. And I think even just thinking about the chemical changes that come about with medication, a lot of people don't realize that you can achieve that without medication. It takes more work. It takes things like daily exercise, but double blind studies have shown that 20 minutes of daily cardio exercise can be as effective as antidepressants, which is just mind blowing that it's not, the first course of action isn't like, let's get you in an exercise program. But our society is also really hyper fixated on the quick fix and the easy thing. And medication, taking a pill is a lot easier and, takes a lot less time than actually getting in 20 minutes of hard, rigorous exercise where you're uncomfortable and your heart rate is up. But ultimately, I take the latter personally.
Let's break that down a bit further for people. Like, why is it 20 minutes of exercise? When they say it has like the same equivalence to like antidepressants, in what way exactly? In what way? So, like, what's
in
happening when you're
in
doing?
raising your Yeah, so it has to do with endorphin release essentially. And I've heard people talk about how specifically cardio exercise, which I know is not always thrilling for people to hear. I'm not a big fan of cardio, even though I know it's so good for you. When your heart rate is increased, your brain gets this like bubble bath of endorphins and feel good molecules. And that's where it starts to bring that like chemical balance back in check. And when you think about this from like a evolutionary point of view, we as humans were always very active. We were always, whether it was hunting and gathering or building structures for our community or walking long distances, we evolved to be doing that exercise. And when we stop, we get a bit lethargic and we get a bit, like we kind of want to nap all day because our bodies actually really need that exercise. So the way that it's really measured is it's psychologically measured with like well-being scales. But the results show that the people who are doing the 20 minutes of exercise every day and taking a placebo pill are getting the same results in increased well-being as the people who are taking the pill and maybe not doing the exercise.
That's so interesting. Like what I'm thinking though too is like I don't think like antidepressant medication that's not really releasing endorphins. That's not what the like why you so when you're exercising you're releasing endorphins and that's why you're feeling more content or you're feeling good or you're feeling I'm not going to say happy but like maybe joyful or
Yeah.
excited or something. But the medication doesn't do that. So the medication is doing something different.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, it's all affecting the neurochemistry, but in different ways, for sure.
So maybe with the antidepressant, I'm not saying, everyone knows I'm a doctor. I'm not against medication, but like I think there's something like other chemicals are being balanced, but not the ones that are actual focused on like the happy feeling. If it's not focused on that. That's why people who are on like people who do have low chemical imbalances and they're being balanced out with the chemicals, that's why they're still not happy, they still don't exercise or they still don't do anything. Because it's a whole different
Yeah.
thing. That's just like, for example, like if we look at something else outside of the mind and we look at let's say I have PCOS, so polycystic ovarian syndrome. And I'm producing an extra hormone because there's cysts on the ovaries, right? And what do doctors do? They give you the pill. What is the pill doing? The pill is allowing me to get my period. The pill is actually suppressing all the symptoms. The symptoms being extra hair growth, your hair falling out, um, you know, uh, unable to sleep, like sleeping patterns. There's lots of significant things that the pill is suppressing, but it's not actually healing. So when
Yeah,
I
and
was,
it's interesting that with the pill, and this is I do want to hear what else you were going to say, but I noticed you said it allows you to get your period, but my understanding is that the period is when you're shedding an egg. The period has to follow ovulation, and with the pill, you don't actually ovulate, right? So even if you're bleeding 7 days a week, it's really just shedding your uterine lining, but it's not actually a true period. So that's, I think, another thing that the pill is suppressing, and that you really need to, we as a society really need to be diving deeply into understanding what we're putting into our bodies and how that's actually affecting us, and maybe altering our natural rhythms. And in some cases it might be totally necessary, and it might prevent you from living in excruciating pain. But yeah, it's worth thinking about what's at cost there.
exactly, absolutely. And what I'm doing now, because I'm not on the pill now, I haven't been for months.
Right.
I'm like natural things that I'm doing is I removed gluten and dairy from my diet, which helps with your insulin resistance and your body's production of like your balance and like pimples and so on. But also I'm taking natural supplements. So like inositol is a natural supplement, and omega-3 is very important because a lot of us women especially like we don't have it's really important omega-3, multivitamin and magnesium, and these different things are all more natural and more like we're not actually getting a lot of these different things in our foods, in our diets. Lots of things have so much preservatives, even if they like the packaging's not clear even if it's not unless I guess fruits and vegetables, you're growing them in your garden, or you're in countries where they don't add any extras. Um, a lot of these things are detrimental to your bodies.
Yeah, and even that, I mean, the fact that our soil these days is just not nearly as fertile as it once was, and all of the nutrients in our food comes from the soil originally. So it does, you know, it causes this need for us to be taking supplements to just get what our ancestors would have gotten right from their food, unless you're eating from really rich, fertile soil, which unfortunately most of us just don't have access to because most of the soils are quite depleted. It becomes, yeah, almost essential to take supplements just to have that, just to be well nourished, essentially.
Exactly, exactly. When we're like looking at, obviously, listeners, the title of the episode, how can you naturally heal bipolar disorder? But before we go into that, when we when we look into, because we're talking about like natural healing, like many different things. Now, you did for yourself, you were naturally healing first your anxiety and depression. Before, so what was the difference? Let's go to there first. What did
Mm-hmm.
you need to add or remove with the natural
Mm-hmm.
process of like your anxiety and depression? Like, are there some things that are like, okay, if it's just anxiety, maybe these things worked for me, but then I realized like when with depression, I needed to add this or remove this for it to actually. You
Mm.
understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And I think the healing of the mind in general for me was all kind of wrapped into one. I was doing it all at the same time. This deep dive really began once I found out that I have bipolar disorder. And I was like, cool, I don't want that to control my life. So how can I get on top of it now and find ways of healing? So for me, what a lot of it looked like first was acceptance and bringing in, what are you
Sorry,
going to say?
I want to cut you off a little bit, just to go back a little bit further, just
Okay.
for people. How does bipolar disorder present with you? What's
Well, these days it doesn't really. But back when it was prevalent, back when I first got diagnosed. So for most of my life, it was experiencing deep depression, and the anxiety kind of tagged along with that. I also have ADHD, so that also bipolar and ADHD and depression have a lot of people have all three. Basically, they often come hand in hand. And depression is obviously one aspect of bipolar, and for most of my life, that's what I was experiencing was severe depressive episodes. They got lighter over time when I started to become aware, and started to do a little bit of healing work. But I still, until I was diagnosed with bipolar, I still was, drinking a lot, which is very normal in our culture, and I still was staying up really late and just not really prioritizing my own self care because I didn't know how important it was. I thought it was more important to go to the party and hang out with my friends until 4 a.m. than it was to go to bed at a reasonable time and wake up with the sun and have a beautiful day. So that was a major shift for me. And when you ask how does bipolar present, essentially, if you experience mania, if you have a manic episode once, and I had already experienced depression as well, that warrants the diagnosis for bipolar. So for me, that episode was, I felt like I was on ecstasy when I was completely sober. And at first, it was like a couple days of hypomania, maybe a little bit longer leading into it, that were a lot of fun. It was like everything was too good to be true. I barely needed to eat. I barely needed to sleep. I couldn't really sleep. I just felt like everything was amazing. And then it got to the point where it was overwhelming, and it was like this energy that was pouring out of me. Whether it was I needed to cry or laugh, or I already speak fast, as you can hear. I'm like trying to speak slowly right now because naturally I just speak really quickly. But I was speaking so fast, people could not understand me. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't, have a conversation. So I needed to go to the hospital in the end and say, hey, I think I'm having, a mania panic attack. I've never been in this position before. I need help. And they were amazing. The psychiatrist I saw was really lovely. And I told her right up front, I'm not looking to be put on medication. I just want to, I want some advice on how to let this pass, but I was actually on my way down to New Zealand on exchange like 2 days after this, which is part of what kind of triggered the attack, the mania panic attack. And I basically just wanted to make it to New Zealand without having a panic attack on the plane. So they handled it really nicely. And they actually gave me 3 days worth of medication and said, you know, one for tonight, one for tomorrow night, one for the overnight plane. And then you're there and, you know, do what you need to do. And if you want more help when you get back, then we're here kind of thing. So I was really grateful for that they didn't, you know, I could have easily been put on a prescription right there. And I'm really grateful that that wasn't, like, they listened and that's not what they forced me to do or encouraged me to do, essentially. So that was really the only time I've actually experienced full-blown mania. And upon arriving to New Zealand, I was still probably hypomanic for a little while, but not to the point of it being dysfunctional. And like I'm sure a lot of people with bipolar would agree, if I could be hypomanic all the time, I absolutely would be, because it's just like this rose-colored veil. Everything is just amazing. Food tastes better, you know, the rain feels better. It's just like you have this like heightened sense of life. It's like when you're mildly depressed, but on the other side, it's like really enjoyable. But it's not sustainable. You can't live like that forever because it's not a proper baseline. So I guess these days, how it presents is I might just notice at times, I'm starting to feel a little bit high today. Like I'm starting to feel a little bit up. I'm speaking faster than normal. For me, this means I shouldn't have sugar. I should make sure I exercise really hard today. And I don't drink caffeine anyway, but I would just be avoiding stimulants.
I want to ask you with that though, because like not before the podcast, but I'm somebody who has like this childlike sometimes comes out of me when I'm excited. And I do talk fast when I'm excited. So how do you know when it's like it's not due to something else, like excitement or like, you know, natural excitement?
Well, a lot of the times I think it is. And I think it comes with self-awareness, and it comes with honestly just me being aware that my brain has the capacity to feel really deeply in both directions. So it's just about me doing my best to keep myself at a baseline, which I do really well at because I'm very self-aware and I have my practices. But it's also just noticing, you know, if I start to dip below that baseline, okay, I'm not feeling 100% today. I need to make sure that maybe today I have a longer meditation. And even if I don't really feel like moving my body, I need to make sure I move my body and spend some time in nature. And if I'm feeling a little bit low, I probably will have like a thicker cacao, something that's a little bit more stimulating and heart opening. And just leaning into like what I truly need, but not to the point that, you know, previously, before I really started on this journey, it would have been, if I'm feeling a little bit low, I'm going to eat nothing but pizza and stay in bed all day and just watch a bunch of movies. And I know that's not good for me. And then that would, you know, trigger a spiral. And all of a sudden, a few days later, I'd be in a very dark place. So it's just, again, it comes with self-awareness and how is this going to make me feel tomorrow? And, you know, am I currently at my baseline? Am I a little bit higher? Am I a little bit lower? What do I need to do to bring myself back to baseline? But I don't honestly fluctuate in a concerning way often at all. And even when I notice like a little fluctuation, I'll say to my partner, like, I'm feeling a little bit up today. I can tell that I'm speaking fast. And maybe that is just because I'm excited, but it's just having that awareness to like bring myself back. And the same if I'm feeling a bit low, I'm like, hey, I'm feeling a little under the weather today. Like, you know, sorry if I'm grouchy at you kind of thing. But it's never like I need to spend the whole day in bed and just be in self-loathing like it was years ago when I was seriously experiencing depression. So
So it's not going
yeah,
to
it
the ends of
doesn't
extreme.
manifest itself much.
Because like
Right.
people who aren't bipolar, you know, your brain is not always regulated. Like your spiral, you're going up and down. You're not always happy. You're not always sad. But I think the range of the up and down is in a narrower area. But with bipolar, it's going
Exactly.
that area is expanded basically.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So it's really just about, I mean, just like anyone who's very emotionally aware, it's just about being aware of, you know, where am I on that spectrum? Because I can go to both extremes. I have been to both extremes, but I haven't hit either of those extremes since I started really prioritizing my mental health and just always doing what I know is going to serve me best. tomorrow or an hour from now what's going to actually feel good. And like
Well,
sometimes that might mean eating pizza and watching a movie, but
and you can do that
it's not
exactly.
every day.
No, you're not
Yeah,
indulging like that all the time. Anything extreme like is not like good for you. So how did you go then
exactly.
from like this like how did you start on this natural healing? Like you said, it started since you were diagnosed with bipolar. So like what were the steps before you got stabilized or you stabilized yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, right after I got diagnosed, I like literally 2 days later, I flew down to New Zealand. I was going on exchange in my third year of university. And while I was there, I just went on a really deep dive of healing. So it's also important to note that before I actually experienced mania, about a year and a half before, my dad had been diagnosed with bipolar. And
Mm.
at that point, I was already very aware that I had struggled with anxiety and depression for years. I was aware of that. I hadn't been diagnosed, but I had those words kind of in my mind. Um, but I wasn't really aware of what mental health really was or the capacity that it can affect your life, even though I'd experienced it, but logically I didn't understand. Um, and when my dad was diagnosed, it actually became my biggest fear in the world that I also had bipolar because he and I didn't get along when I was growing up. We were both very stubborn. We were both very sick. I was struggling with depression and we didn't know that. He was struggling with bipolar and we didn't know that. And we butt heads a lot. So my view of bipolar disorder was this angry human who had outbursts and, spoke to his children in ways that I don't think you should ever speak to anybody. And that was my idea of what it meant to have bipolar disorder. I was so afraid that that was present in me and that I would someday treat my children the way that, speak to them the way that he spoke to me and that sort of thing. So I was really afraid of this. And I can talk about this openly because my dad and I have healed our relationship and now we have a really beautiful, friendship essentially as adults, which is great.
Does your
So
father
are you going to say?
like is he naturally healing his bipolar or is he
No,
taking
he's
medication?
he's very much on medication. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Is he doing
Which is probably also aided in my fear because he takes many pills. He's a classic, getting. I mean, I guess he's over middle age now, but he's a classic in his 60s with he has bipolar meds and the blood pressure meds and the XYZ and just
yeah.
his little pill box every day, which is something I just never want for myself. I understand why a lot of people have gone that route in society, but it's something that I don't desire. But so when I was diagnosed with bipolar, it was like I had just faced my biggest fear in the world, like worst possible case scenario had just come true, and I was totally fine. And I realized that having this diagnosis doesn't all of a sudden change who I am, and it doesn't make me into somebody that I'm not. And I've never been an angry person. It's not going to now make me an angry person. So it was so relieving to be like, okay, wow, I've just done the scariest thing I can possibly think of, and I'm totally fine.
Mm.
So when I went down to New Zealand, I just did a really deep dive into facing my fears. And this was huge for my anxiety because I used to be just afraid of trying anything out remotely outside of my comfort zone. Going to New Zealand was a huge one, but it was also something that was very exciting. And I was
Yeah.
like, I can't pass up this opportunity. But I never learned to ski as a kid, even though my school would go on like a ski trip every year. And I was just too anxious. I was afraid of like, what if I'm bad at it? What if people laugh at me? What if I hurt myself? Just, you know, generalized anxiety, just it would fixate on anything, make up any excuse. I'm not going skiing. So I went down to New Zealand and one of the first things I did was learn how to ski and started, really immersing myself in nature. I shaved my head because I knew that was going to be really uncomfortable and I wanted to have that really uncomfortable experience because I knew I would grow from it. I did my yoga teacher training that year as well, and just started really, really exploring what it actually means to where are my actual boundaries of expansion. How can I keep pushing my comfort zone to find that growth? And a really huge pivotal part of that actually, allowed me to get into skiing and get into the outdoors and find that balance was, like I said, shifting my priorities from staying up late at the bar and binge drinking until 4 a.m. and sleeping the next day away, which, I was 19 at this point. That was like a very normal part of university life at that stage, was to do that and just waste the weekend in bed. I shifted that priority to say, okay, you know what? I can still go to the bar with my friends. I can have one drink. I can come home at 11 and go to bed and wake up and have a beautiful day. And I found so much more fulfillment out of doing that. Even I remember times when I was lying in bed and like, oh man, all my friends are still at the bar and that boy that I like is there. And whatever else was going
Yeah.
through my head. But I was like, no, you know what? I'm going skiing tomorrow. I need to go to bed. And the next day I would always be like, wow, I'm so happy that I actually prioritized this and chose to do the thing that was going to be good for me tomorrow instead of choosing to stay up and like enjoy another moment, another drink at the bar that isn't really going to serve me the next day.
Yeah. I love that. I love your process. I love your journey. Just for people's references. So this was when you were 19. How old are you now? Just so people don't have an
Mm-hmm.
idea of how long you've been not, managing this.
Yeah, I'm 27 now.
Hmm. Okay. So it's been almost 10 years.
Yeah, yeah, coming up on it. And I mean, really, my darkest days were when I was actually 12 years old. That was the deepest depression I've ever experienced. When I actually planned on taking my own life, and thankfully, I never acted on it. Um, but I've never been that low again. And there are little glimpses. It's not like I wasn't healing at all until I hit 19. It's like there were always little glimpses of like, oh, maybe I am worthy of love was the first really big one when I was 15 that I was like, maybe I need to like stop talking to myself in such a mean lens. And I started kind of shifting my thought patterns and deciding that I wanted to heal. But it wasn't until I was 19 that I really was like, okay, I need to get serious about this or I'm going to need to take some medication because I don't want to live, with all these fluctuations anymore.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What about when it came to a relationship? How did you, because naturally, uh, when you're starting a relationship, there's a lot of just anxiety and like, vulnerability that's coming out. And I'm sure other spikes happened. So how did you step
Mm.
into a relationship while managing your bipolar? And then how are you managing? Like, how is your partner in you? Like, how do you communicate when things are going on?
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you asked me about that because I don't think I've ever been asked about that before. And it's actually my relationships were so heavily affected by my mental health that I feel really bad for the people I dated in high school because I was just so unstable and I fell into the classic, if we talk about relationships or attachment styles, I had a very anxious attachment style, which is very normal for people who struggle with anxiety. And I, always wanted a lot from that person. I'm also a hopeless romantic, and I'm like, I want you, knocking on my window at 3 a.m. when you somehow know I can't sleep to, whisk me away into the roses. Like I just expected so much, and I somehow often ended up with partners that had more, or with boyfriends. We wouldn't have used the term partner back then when it wasn't that serious, but that had very avoidant attachment styles, and it led to very passionate relationships that were sparky and exciting at first, but then had really intense fights and arguments. And when that would happen, it'd be like, I want to sit down until this is resolved. And the human on the other side was often like, I need space for a while, which was always hard for me. Like, even if that was a day for me, I was like, oh my gosh, does that mean they don't love me? And, all these things that come about when you have that anxious attachment style and when you don't come from a place of already being solid and secure and having that self love for yourself. So relationships were very hard when I was in the thick of it, for sure. And I still, we all desire love, and I still would seek external validation. And I think that's also very normal as a young woman, without a lot of self love at that time, to seek external validation from men and say, oh, if you think I'm beautiful and you like my body, then that must mean that you love me. And to seek it in that way, which was really unhealthy, for many years. And I mean, my partner now, I was in the best place I've ever been when we met. And that was actually a big part of our journey of falling in love, was that watching him fall in love with me helped me to fall in love with myself even more deeply.
How
And
long
the
ago was
day that
this?
this is almost 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been together for a little
Continue.
while now. But the day that we actually, became partners and essentially decided to spend our lives together, it happened very quickly. It was a very like old school fairy tale romance that I know is not like the normal way that people get together these days, but it really worked for us. But that day, I had never felt such unconditional love for anyone. And I also felt it for myself. And it was just like this beautiful union of like, there's so much love here, and I feel it for him, and I feel it for me, and he feels it for him, and he feels it for me. And it was just so, so beautiful, because it wasn't like this, I need you to complete me sort of situation. It was like, I'm whole and complete on my own, and you're helping me see how whole and complete I am. And that's amazing. And
How did
yeah,
he do that?
it's been almost
What,
exactly 3 years.
that's amazing. How did he do that though? Like, what was that thing that allowed, I'm not talking from his end, he's not here, but from you, what was that thing that you had this openness to his love?
Hmm. I think our connection was just so genuine and easeful, and neither of us were looking for anything either. Like when we met as friends, and both of us just thought we were developing a beautiful friendship. And so there was no expectation. It wasn't like we were going on dates and trying to get to know each other in like a, do I want to be with you kind of way. It was just like we were hanging out and talking about books we liked, and we were climbing together and highlining and swimming and surfing. And we were both traveling and living in vans in Tasmania. And it was just so natural, and there was such a genuine interest from both of us just to spend time with each other. And it wasn't a sexually driven relationship. Like it wasn't like a passionate, I want you kind of thing, which every single one of my previous relationships has been very physically driven and very passionate. This one was very much like, I want to get to know you as a human. And when that physicality started to develop, it was more like, I want to cuddle you. It wasn't like, I want this passionate romantic night. It was like, I just want to be close to you. And it was just really sweet and easy. And it was just so clear. Like I could see that he loved me in the way that he acted, and the way that we paid attention to each other. I got really lucky. I know that our love story is very rare, but it also comes from a place of both of us having done a lot of self-development work and done a lot of healing before we met. So neither of us were in a place where we were like, I need someone to complete me. We were both just like, I am whole and I'm loving life and I'm doing my thing. And then this other human came along, and it was like, whoa, we can really enhance each other's lives here.
I love that for you. I love that for you so much. I'm single. I haven't got that, but I hope one day I have that too. But what I wanted to say was, has there been any moments with your with your bipolar in the relationship? Has been any moments where you're like, um, I guess a high spike or a high fall, and like, how did you manage that in the relationship?
So I think maybe it's bipolar, or maybe it's my personality. Sometimes I can be emotional and a little bit reactive to things. And that comes up when I feel triggered by something. And I honestly can't think of a specific time, because we've never had any really like major fights. Like we argue like any couple does at times. But I don't think there's really been, there are times when I'm like, hey, I'm feeling a bit low and I need a bit of extra support today. But we're really great at communicating about that. Or there's times when I'm like, hey, I'm feeling a bit up, like, because I'm very much a morning person and he's not. So on the mornings where I'm feeling a little bit up, he can be a little bit like, he can get a bit grouchy if I'm a little bit too excited. And he's like, I just need a coffee and some time to wake up. And, I don't drink coffee. I just wake up at a 10 and I'm like ready to go. So, there's little moments like that where it's like, okay, I'm aware that I need to maybe take a bit of space away from him right now because I can feel that I'm a lot and he doesn't maybe have the capacity to handle, all the lot right now. But again, we're really good at just communicating about that and being like, okay, well, I'm going to go do my thing and, use this energy that's feeling good. And you can go and have your coffee and have your, slow morning with your book or your chess game or whatever. So I wouldn't say that it's affected our relationship too much. But again, we met when I was already so deep on this journey and hadn't experienced, a deep depression in years and hadn't experienced mania other than that one time when I was 19. So
do you think it's possible
on the
though for
day-to-day life,
people?
it's just a little.
Do you think it's possible for people who haven't worked on themselves and or hadn't been managing it or are having those manic moments to go into a relationship, or you don't think that's possible, or should, like, it's not healthy?
I think it all comes down to self-awareness. I think every person is going to be different in their, fluctuations and in how they manage those. And I think it's probably very easy. When I was in my manic state, I could genuinely see how it would be very easy. And this is probably part of the reason I went to the hospital. I was like, I feel so on top of the world that nothing could possibly go wrong. Like, I could go to a casino right now and there's no way I could lose. And I can see how people could genuinely like spend all of their money or, get married on a whim or things like that. Like, I could see how that could happen. And I think that's when it really comes down to self-awareness and needing to be able to check in and say, okay, is this idea actually logical, or am I manic right now and I need to go get some help before I do something that is not going to feel good for me in a few days? I wouldn't say that it's, necessarily unhealthy to explore relationships when you're feeling a little bit up. I would say when you're feeling down is probably potentially more detrimental because you don't want to put yourself in a position where you feel like you need to depend on someone to help you feel better. And I think that's really where, like, you need to be in any kind of relationship, whether you have any sort of diagnosis or experience of depression or not, it doesn't matter. If you're looking for someone else to complete you, you're never going to find that true fulfillment. And it's all about, being a whole and complete human being on your own and secure in yourself and in love with yourself as well is a really huge piece before you can find someone to share that love with and to enhance each other's lives, but not out of necessity, out of like this is genuinely amazing for both of us, so let's do it.
I love that. We're on the same page. You resonate very much with me, Carleigh. Out of curiosity, what culture is because you guys have been in Tassie, is your partner Australian? Is he an Aussie?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Nice.
Yeah, we got lucky. I'm from Canada. He's from Australia. So I'm in the process of immigrating through him.
Oh, you're going to be living here.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Oh, I love that for you. Then we can meet. We'll be able to meet.
Yeah, absolutely.
That'll be nice. So how about you walk us through your 8 simple steps to naturally healing bipolar, anxiety, depression?
Yeah, sure. So like I've talked about a lot, the first step is actually all about self-love. And you have to start here because in any sort of healing journey, you can't hate yourself into becoming someone that you love. You need to start with the compassion, the self-love, the acceptance, and decide, I want to get better because I'm worthy of feeling my best and because I deserve to heal. Not because you desire to be totally different or because you don't like how you are, but because you actually love yourself enough to put in the work to find healing. So step 1 is all about self-love, essentially. Step 2 is the only time in my coaching practice that I really help someone look backwards in their life. And I kind of think of the biggest difference between therapy and coaching is that therapy is quite often quite backwards focused and quite looking at what has happened to you in your life and through your family history and throughout time leading up to this moment to make you who you are. And there's a lot of, relevancy there. But coaching is more like, here's where you are and here's where you want to be. And how can we take tangible steps to help you get there? So we don't spend a lot of time looking at the past, but in step 2, essentially, we're looking at the past to see what has happened that you still haven't fully accepted, that you still haven't fully let go of and made peace with, because a lot of the times we're carrying around, this baggage or these little demons or this energy that hasn't fully been processed, and it's maybe stopping us from fully stepping into the person that we want to be because we have these things still holding us back. So step 2 is all about owning your past and accepting your past so that you can move forward. And then step 3, I kind of think of it as like, if you have an infection and you go to the hospital, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to open up that wound and clean out the infection. They're not just going to, slap a Band-Aid on it and say, it'll be fine. You have to actually clear it out. So step 2 is kind of about opening up that wound. You're exposing, old traumas and uncomfortable things that you probably don't really want to look at, but those are the infections we need to open up. And then in step 3, it's all about actually clearing out that clutter. So this is very physically clearing out clutter from your closet, your bathroom, like looking at your physical space and energetically clearing that environment. And also diving into your mind, your behaviors and habits and relationships, and looking at what is not serving you anymore to move forward with this healing journey, and what can you let go of. So that one often takes a lot longer than the 2 weeks that my program really, dedicates to it. But it's a great place to start with the clearing out, and to start diving into your mind and think, what thoughts am I having that are not serving, and how can I release those and shift those into something that I actually want to bring in. And then step 4, we start to actually get into the physical side of healing. So step 4 is all about nourishing the body. It's diving into the mind-body connection. It's starting to do, the exercise and diving into nutrition and really just connecting with your whole body health and noticing how that is affecting your mind. Step 5, we dive more deeply into specifically the mind and start looking at meditation, connection with nature, more about your relationship and how these things are actually nourishing you, or if they're not, again, kind of shifting those things around. And all the while, we're still maintaining all of these practices. So like, you might be on step 5 and something comes up that you find really triggering. And why is that triggering? Well, maybe something happened in the past and we need to revisit something from step 2. And it's a lifelong journey, really, but this is kind of the foundation. In step 6, it's almost like revisiting step 1, which is all about self-love. Step 6 is about letting yourself be selfish. And this really comes in when you start to recognize that by putting yourself first and by doing the things that are going to fuel you, it's actually benefiting everyone around you. And, a lot of the people that I work with, a lot of my clients are actually parents, and they'll say to me, like, I want to heal because I want to be a better mother or father or spouse, or, it's often not about us just wanting to feel better, but it's about wanting to show up better for those around us. So that's what, module 6 is all about, is kind of prioritizing your own self-care and doing the things you have to do because it actually benefits everyone. Step 7 is all about making yourself uncomfortable, which, like I spoke about when I, faced my fears and started really diving into like, what are my limits and how can I push myself a little bit further? And if you practice yoga, yoga is all about embracing those edges and making yourself find comfort in the discomfort. And that's what step 7 is all about, because pushing anxiety, studies show that when we experience an emotion, and specifically when we experience anxiety and we try to ignore it and kind of repress it and push it down and pretend it's not there and brush it off, I'm fine, it's all good. It doesn't just go away. It actually comes back even stronger. So this module, number 7, make yourself uncomfortable, is really all about leaning into that anxiety, leaning into that discomfort, learning what you're actually capable of so that you can process those emotions and release them, and learn that you can do literally anything you set your mind to. And then that brings us to module 8, which is really just all about fine tuning and having a look at, what's happened. The program's 4 months. So it's about having a look at what's happened over the past 4 months? What have you learned? What has felt good? What maybe hasn't felt good? What do we need to tweak? And really fine tuning a lifestyle that's sustainable for you moving forward. Because this style of healing is not like a one and done. In 4 months, I'm going to feel better for the rest of my life and I never have to put any maintenance on kind of thing. Like, I've been doing this for years and I still maintain my practices every single day, if not definitely every 2 days, that I'm making sure I'm doing all the things I need to do. I'm always nourishing my body. I prioritize my sleep. I exercise very regularly and meditate and maintain my connections, all of these things that are my medicine. So step 8 is all about figuring out what are those things for you and what does that actually look like in your life and how can we bring those in a sustainable way. And you've already been practicing for 4 months kind of thing. How can you continue to uphold that lifestyle to maintain the healing? And
Beautiful.
that's essentially my program.
I love it. It's very well thought through, which I love. I love that it's well researched, and I love the steps that are involved, and I love like exactly how you've put them. And the key, at the end of all of that was like the maintenance, which I think people, need to realize that you're maintaining your body, your mind, your health every day, and that's what you need to be consistent with that. I love the program. It's fantastic, Carleigh. Like, yeah, incredible. Um, thank
Thank
you so
you.
much for the conversation. I think it was beautiful. I loved everywhere we went with it. I love to ask all the guests at the end of the conversation, how has the conversation with me right now made you reflect or highlight anything to you?
That's such a great question. It's made me reflect more on my relationships, I think, and on the way that mental health really manifests in relationships. And I think after this conversation, I'm going to go and ask my partner about the things you were asking me, like, hey, have there been times when my bipolar has come up and it's had an effect on us? Because I genuinely can't think of any, but maybe he can. I don't know. But it was really interesting to reflect on how my mental health affected my relationships throughout this whole journey, because that's not something that I think about all that often. It's normally just about me and my experience, but everything that we do has an effect on the people around us. So it's been cool to reflect upon that.
Oh, beautiful. I love that for you. And where can people find you, Carleigh?
People can find me on my website, which is manasmastery.com, which is manas is MANAS. On Instagram at manas.mastery, or by email, which is just manasmastery@gmail.com. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Carleigh, for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Tiffany. This was so much fun.